Bomb fallout, a frontal attack today from the Trump administration to push back on reports questioning the effectiveness of the bombing in Iran. A different type of detonation in Congress, where a major blow might have been struck on the major tax and government overhaul bill President Trump wants passed. And the 2025 election that's captured America's attention because of the state and because of the candidates. Hi, I'm Scott McFarland in Washington. In for Major tonight, we welcome you to the Takeout. In the 1975 movie Rollerball, it was dystopian. Instead of waging war, the powerful decided disputes through this violent game that was played on skates. In real life, war is not something you want to compare to sports, nor should us sports fans casually be using terms like war and battle to describe games. But there was a moment today, where there was one unexpected parallel. Just like we see coaches and players yelling at or working the refs, sometimes yelling the loudest, not at their competitor, but at the refs or the umpire or the judges. Today, it was the nation's defense secretary speaking to the country from the Pentagon, championing last weekend's U.S. military airstrikes against Iran. But he saved his harshest words, not for the Iranians, but for the reporters who've been trying to understand the impact of those bombs.
See, this is a point. This is how difficult it is to actually manage. You just watched a video of what this weapon is capable of. Jennifer, you've been about the worst, the one who misrepresents the most intentionally. See, this is the kind of thing the press does, right? We don't do that anymore. We don't play your little games.
The White House press secretary picked up from there, attacking a CNN reporter who reported on what she'd learned about a U.S. government assessment of those strikes.
She should be ashamed of herself. And that's not what reporting is. Journalism is trying to find the facts and the truth. And this week, we saw this same reporter being used to push a fake narrative to try to undermine the President of the United States.
Whether or not the administration is working the refs here today, there remain questions about just how much of a victory was actually won. Our Eleanor Watson was in the room for today's press conference with the defense secretary. She joins me now from the Pentagon. Ellie, what was your big takeaway from what you heard today?
Well, the defense secretary, in only his second press conference in that press briefing room since his tenure started, came in pretty critical of the press, criticizing the reports this week on the initial assessment put out by the Defense Intelligence Agency, details of which leaked to reporters, criticizing them for the coverage, saying that that assessment was only preliminary, only initial. He did not deny the assessment exists, but criticized the framing. The criticism of the media from there spread out to specific outlets and to specific reporters, including Fox News' Jennifer Griffin, which was shocking to the Pentagon press corps in the room, who as a whole respect Jennifer and are devoted to asking critical questions, giving scrutiny to public officials, no matter what administration is in the White House.
Some of the answers to some of the other questions seemed incomplete or begged further follow-up. Take a listen to what our colleague Charlie D'Agata asked of the secretary when he had his turn to ask a question.
He's going to know things that you're not going to know, that the press isn't going to know, and he's reflecting that the sources he's seeing are highly credible. They've given credible intelligence. They or those processes have given credible intelligence in the past, and that's what he's basing it on.
You think we need to see that?
Do you have a top secret clearance, sir?
Eventually,
okay.
The American public wants to see it.
Charlie's asking about how they're measuring if this was a successful strike. So how is the Pentagon determining if this was a successful strike?
Well, the top military officer in the U.S. military, General Dan Kane, next to Secretary Hegseth today, said that the execution of the mission, how it was designed, how the B-2 bomber pilots, the fighter jet pilots, and the submarine crew conducted the mission was successful, but he said the military won't, quote, grade its own homework on the final impact of the strikes. It will rely on the intelligence community to assess the final damage assessment. One of the 18 intelligence agencies, the Defense Intelligence Agency, was the one who put out that initial assessment, but that was only initial. The rest of the intelligence community will collect other streams of information to build out a final report for the Pentagon and the White House, but ultimately it will be up to President Trump to determine whether or not the mission was accomplished.
All righty. Ellie Watson at the Pentagon. Thank you. Joining me now is Jason Rezaian. He was unjustly imprisoned in Iran for 544 days while serving as the Washington Post's correspondent in Tehran and was released in January 2016. Jason, based on that experience, what is your reaction to what you saw happen in Iran Saturday and what's happened since?
Gosh, Scott, I mean, so many different reactions for me. I still have a lot of friends and family in Iran. I'm very worried about them, concerned about their well-being in the short term during the missile strikes, but also in the long term. Now that there's a ceasefire in place, our experience in Iran over the years has been whenever there's pressure or threat or attack from beyond Iran's borders, the Islamic Republic takes out its revenge mostly on the people of Iran. So at the moment, they'll be looking for people that they will identify honestly or in fictionalized ways as being collaborators with Israel and the U.S. in this. And so I worry about the ongoing suffering of people in Iran. And I guess, for most people, that would be burying the lead of the big geopolitical shift that's taken place. The one thing that I'm a little bit, I would say, happy about is that this idea that Iran was this massive, impenetrable threat to peace in the region and in the world. I think we've kind of diffuse that narrative. Iran is certainly an authoritarian state, done a lot of terrible things to the United States, to our allies, but also to its own people. But ultimately, this is not a state that's a true threat to Israel, the United States, or our allies in any existential way.
Iran's supreme leader today, in the first public statement since the bombing, a social media post, called it a slap in the face to the U.S. How do you translate that?
So when you are dealing with authoritarian ideologues like Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, part and parcel of their identity and of their public posturing with their own population is to frame everything as a victory. I don't see how there's anything that Iran achieved except losing its air defenses and much of its nuclear program. And I think the meager response to the U.S. bombing raids on Iranian nuclear sites, the 12 missiles that Iran fired at our base in Qatar in a very choreographed way, just indicates that they're trying to say uncle without saying uncle.
Why are they so hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon? Why go through all of this over years, if not decades?
To be honest with you, Scott, I don't know that I agree that they're hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon. I think they are hell-bent on having the technology and the capability to do so, but crossing over that line of actually weaponizing, I don't think it's in their interest. And these are not crazy people. They have a ideology and a worldview that's very different than our own, and very fanatical and radically religious. But at the end of the day, their moves have been pretty pragmatic, by and large over the years. But I think crossing over and actually trying to finally achieve a nuclear bomb or a small arsenal of bombs would potentially set off an arms race in the region. Saudi Arabia would likely want to get one. Turkey would likely want to get one. And I don't think that that's a neighborhood that anybody wants to see materialize. So, I think there is a national element of this. This Islamic Republic has always positioned itself as neither East nor West, its own brand of system that is flying in the face of the United States and the global order, not very effectively, and at the expense of their economy and the freedom of their people for the last 46 years. And I think, in a way, destroying much of its nuclear capability and negotiating a peace with the United States might be their only way out.
We see the book over your shoulder, the prisoner book you wrote. The prison where you were held was hit by the Israeli airstrikes. So what reaction did you have when you learned that or saw that news?
Again, I mean, I think so much about the people that are inside that prison right now. I don't know anybody that's currently being held in Evin prison, but I know a lot of people who have been there over the years. Other dual national Americans and nationals of other countries, of the UK, of European countries, of Australia, Canada, people who were held there for years on end for not doing anything other than, stepping foot in that country legally. I think the image of the front door being blasted open conjures so many feelings for me and anybody else who's been there. I'm not sure yet. I still don't really fully understand what Israel's intention was. If they were going after targets inside in the prison, there are some indications that some pretty high-level judiciary officials were killed in that attack. So I think that might be part of it. This idea that blowing that door open would be a way to free these prisoners seems a little bit far-fetched to me. So it's just one more symbol of this decaying system that. I don't think the Islamic Republic is going to fall tomorrow, but it's definitely not getting stronger. It's getting closer to its expiration date and its end than it is to its beginning.
Very helpful insights. Jason Rezaian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
The Supreme Court has ruled South Carolina can block Medicaid funds from Planned Parenthood. The 6-3 decision likely paves the way for other states to try to do the same. Public money typically can't be used to pay for abortions, but can be used to pay for other services offered by Planned Parenthood, like contraception and cancer screenings. The country's biggest abortion provider is calling this ruling a, quote, grave injustice. Speaking of Medicaid, the Senate parliamentarian has struck key provisions related to the program from that big budget bill. It's a setback for Republicans who are racing to pass the legislation. Nicole Killian joins us now from Capitol Hill. Nicole, what did the parliamentarian do and what does it mean?
Well, this morning, the parliamentarian struck down a key provision in this so-called Big Beautiful Bill as it pertains to Medicaid, and a particular provision involving what's known as provider taxes, which are taxes that states charge and use in part. They tax providers and use that money in part to help fund their Medicaid programs. So it was kind of a controversial issue and sticking point among some Senate Republicans. But basically, the parliamentarian said it didn't meet muster in terms of the budget rules, because, of course, this bill has to be passed under budget reconciliation, so there are very strict parameters around that. So what some Republicans have said is that, look, we may go back to the drawing board on this. It doesn't mean the bill is dead. Obviously, there is a lot of effort to try to meet the president's deadline of getting this bill passed by the July 4th recess. So as of now, that is what Republicans are working towards, to try to retool and reconfigure. And keep in mind, the parliamentarian has struck down other provisions as well, including some elements of the bill dealing with SNAP cuts, but we've already seen Republicans retool that and send it back to the parliamentarian. So it's a lot of revision and revising that's happening until we see that final text, which will signal ultimately a vote in the Senate when it's ready.
All of this is so fragile. And if this parliamentarian decision throws like a 30-pound weight on one side, how do they balance this back up in time to pass it by July 4th?
Yeah, well, that is a key challenge for Republicans, especially, for instance, with this issue of the provider tax. They were hoping to cut that because they saw that as a way to enact more savings. And it was a change from what we saw in the House version of the bill. So in terms of retooling this, they also have to go back to the drawing board and find a way to recoup some of that savings, if you will, to help pay for the president's tax cuts and other provisions in this bill. But that being said, GOP leaders John Thune and Speaker Mike Johnson have been very insistent that they will meet the president's deadline as best they can. As you know, they're due to break for recess tomorrow, but both leaders have indicated that they will keep members in and kind of plow through until they get this done.
Everybody should be in the best of moods then. Nicole Killian at the U.S. Senate, thank you. Still to come, giving fired federal workers a leg up. The effort in one county that could help those impacted by the DOGE cuts.
This administration and its impact on Virginians has been worse than they anticipated.
Democrat Abigail Spanberger could be the first female governor of Virginia. The historic race there and how President Trump could impact the outcome. And senators today received a classified briefing on the Iran strikes. Among them, Republican Tim Sheehy. I'll talk to Senator Sheehy next on The Takeout. The president just hosted an event at the White House looking to galvanize support for his big budget bill. At the event was Montana Republican Senator Tim Sheehy. That's where we find him. He joining us from the White House North Lawn. Senator, thanks for joining us. The parliamentarian seems to have thrown a wrench into the operation here, made some rulings that may complicate things. What do you propose be done?
She's doing her job. This is part of the process. Just like a business deal, Scott, there's going to be a negotiation. We're going to push out what we think we want to get out of it, and we're going to find out what's the art of the possible. I think all of us expected there'd be a lot of changes from the parliamentarian, but this is the process that we have in our legislature. So we've gotten some edits back from her. There's drafting going on in each committee to see what they can go back with, but ultimately we're going to get to a point where we're ready to move this thing forward in the next few days. This is the top priority for the president. It's the top priority for Senator Thune and Speaker Johnson. So, of course, we expected some of these setbacks. Now we're doing some edits. We're going to get to the next phase, and we're going to get this thing across the finish line.
Something that could impact trillions of dollars here, Senator. If it's so complicated and so large, why the rush to do it by July 4th?
Well, we have a debt ceiling issue that's happening in August. We also have a border crisis, which has largely been solved. But now we still have issues remaining from that we want to make sure we can have enough agents doing national enforcement. We want to make sure we can complete the border wall. That issue is not just going away. We've solved it for now, but that can return later. We also have certainty for our business environment that we want to provide a tax rubric that is certain and predictable. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 is going to be made permanent with this bill. The sooner we can give certainty to our business environment, to our investment ecosystem, the sooner we're going to see a lot of that investment come back. We've already seen tremendous investment that the president's brought back, but a predictable tax regime is key for long-term investment in this country. Things like equipment expensing, R&D expensing, no tax on tips. A lot of these policies are very focused on specific sectors of our population, our economy, and make sure we're unleashing working-class job growth and also small business growth. The sooner we do that, the better it is for the economy.
The Republicans, both the House and the Senate, seem unified on the need to extend tax cuts, but it's that Medicaid issue. And some of your fellow Republicans in the Senate, Senator Sheehy, have expressed concern about the impact on rural hospitals. If there's any squeezing or tightening of Medicaid, you got a lot of rural hospitals in Montana. Do you share those concerns?
Yeah, we're actually a frontier healthcare state in many parts of our state. We have folks that have to drive multiple hours to get care. And one of those communities we're most focused on is veterans. And that's why our VA reforms that we're pushing through, that we're starting to draft along with Secretary Collins, of ensuring that community care continues to be a part of the growing VA ecosystem. We've seen an underutilization of the community care model, and that's a key part of these rural hospitals, Scott. And a lot of folks don't talk about that. Our highest percentage of veterans live rural, and some of the largest payers for these rural hospitals, historically the largest single customer, has oftentimes been the VA through community care. But as that process has been edged out, especially during the Biden years, we saw a very large incentive pushed within the VA to stop using community care. That's been a huge impact on those rural hospitals. Let's not forget also that the Medicaid, Medicare reforms that are primarily being drafted across the Republican conference in no way are focused on taking care away from anyone who's earned it, who deserves it, who needs it. It's focused primarily on fraud, waste, abuse, illegal immigrants, and also foreign actors who literally are able to extract millions and billions of dollars from our health care entitlement system, sending it overseas, doing false pharmaceutical orders, ordering pharmaceuticals that are then sold into the black market. There's been a tremendous amount of fraud, waste, and abuse. These different types of policies would help get that under control and make sure we're protecting Medicare and Medicaid for those who truly need it.
I want to turn to the briefing you got on Iran. You have a unique vantage point as a former Navy SEAL. What did you hear? that caught your ear during this briefing on what happened last Saturday?
Well, obviously classified briefing, so we can't get into specifics. But the most important takeaway from it, which I think has been largely reported, is that mission success, bottom line, mission success. This is a historic strike. No other country in the world would we or the free world allow it to behave like this. They've been kidnapping and murdering Americans and Israelis for 46 years. Let's not forget how this war with Iran started. They started the war with us 46 years ago by taking our embassy and hundreds of Americans hostage. Then they bombed the Beirut barracks in 1983, killing 242 Marines. And since then, it's been a constant reign of terror against American, Westerners, Israelis. Their foreign policy is death to America, death to Israel. And over the past year and a half, they've been raining ballistic missiles trying to wipe Israel off the map. They've been firing anti-ship missiles at American naval vessels and civilian vessels. They've been murdering, butchering, and burning alive American citizens. And we've allowed that to go unanswered for 46 years. This strike was a clear message to the world. New sheriff in town, we're not going to put up with it. And most importantly, it seriously debilitated their nuclear program. Call it obliterated, call it delayed, call it destructed, use whatever word you want. Then there's no question, though, that this program was severely damaged and set back a long time.
Just a moment left, Senator. What do you make of the split in public opinion on this? You and I are people of our age. We watched the Gulf War, we watched the Persian Gulf War, the Afghanistan War, and the public galvanized behind it. Seems pretty split on this strike in Iran.
Well, I think most folks, north of 70%, have said they supported this strike. The polls I've seen have shown actually quite broad support for it. So I don't think it's a split as you described, but I do think, of course, there's always going to be an element of the American people. This goes all the way back to our founding as a nation, Scott, as you well know. Americans have always been reticent about military action in other countries if they don't see a clear present threat to Americans. So I think that's a healthy part of our republic to have that debate. I think it's a critical part of how our government functions. But in this case, in this specific instance, there's no question this was a righteous attack, and the strike was successful.
Senator Tim Sheehy on a 100-degree day, joining us from the White House North Lawn. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, Scott.
Up next, Big Apple politics. Zohran Mamdani's rapid political ascent in the New York City mayoral primary. Part of his conversation with CBS News New York is coming up. And welcome back to the Takeout. Here's what else we're watching this evening. Lawyers for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man abruptly deported to El Salvador in March, are asking a federal judge to return him to Maryland. He was recently brought back to Tennessee, where he's facing federal human smuggling charges. His lawyers also want to block ICE from deporting him. The Department of Justice has said if Abrego Garcia is released from criminal custody, he will be re-arrested by immigration authorities and placed into removal proceedings. President Trump's battle with Harvard over allegations of anti-Semitism and a liberal political agenda is leading to cuts at the Ivy League school. The Kennedy School of Government says it has laid off staff, is pausing future hiring, and will reduce department budgets. The move comes as the White House withholds billions in federal funding and blocks the admission of international students. J.B. Pritzker has been rumored as a potential 2028 White House contender and one of the Democratic Party's most vocal critics of President Trump. But for now, he's focusing on a third term as Illinois governor. The 60-year-old Hyatt Hotel heir made the announcement this morning in a campaign video highlighting his record as a two-term governor. Joining me now to talk about that and more, Bloomberg News White House correspondent Catherine Lucy's here, Notice reporter Evan McMorris-Santoro, and CBS News health reporter Alex Tin. We have an all-star team here. I want to begin with the politics of the week, the race in New York City. Let's take a listen to what we got from our CBS New York reporter Ali Bauman, who spoke with Zohran Mamdani about what the Democratic Party should look like.
I think it should look like anyone who's focused on working people, because ultimately that was what made me proud to become a Democrat, and so many Americans feel the same way, and yet for quite a while have felt as that we've left our roots, we've left our focus, and it's time to come back to that and show that Donald Trump's attempts to speak for working people are just looking to exploit the despair that they are living through, not actually sincerely responding to it with any kind of proposal that would deliver them out of it.
This week, that's the face of the Democratic Party. That's the name associated with the Democratic Party. Catherine, how comfortable are people you talking to on the Hill or in Washington about that?
Well, Republicans are very comfortable with talking about this as the face of the Democratic Party. Democrats are mixed. I mean, certainly there are a lot of Democrats who are worried that this is going to push them too far to the left, that this is going to make harder for them to run nationally. But I do think also there's a lot of Democrats saying, look, we have not been succeeding in the last, they certainly didn't succeed in the last presidential cycle. And one of the complaints was a lack of a coherent economic message. And obviously, he ran in New York on a message that really landed. I mean,
about housing,
about bus fare, about childcare, about making life that people see increasingly as unaffordable, affordable again. And I think that is something that some Democrats are trying to figure out. How do you harness that piece of what happened in New York this week?
What do you make of it, Evan? It's your home area.
That's right. I mean, I live in New York, and we were watching this whole race play out over the past few months, and it's been quite an amazing story. Because on the one hand, what you have is really the maturation of this Bernie Sanders style of politics, okay? I mean, this was like very well done efforts that we have seen before from candidates like that AOC, Bernie Sanders, but also just a complete faceplant by the Democratic establishment. I mean, they put forward this Andrew Cuomo candidate who they kind of didn't want, but they didn't sort of say shouldn't do it. They didn't sort of get in the way of it. And a lot of voters were looking at an option that they really didn't want. And then somebody who was saying, hey, I got a lot of stuff that we could do that could be interesting and new. I'm exciting. And I don't think it's a huge surprise that they lost, that the establishment lost to that. And to me, the most interesting thing that's happened is that we haven't seen the Democratic establishment in mass sort of rally against this candidate. We have seen some people, some Democrats here and there pop up. But in general, this message of we're going to be really economic populist, we're going to really focus on these kind of issues, we have seen a lot of Democrats say, I think there might be something there for us. This might be something that we need to do and embrace. And after all of these years of this kind of conversation inside the Democratic Party, I think it's possible that that populist side is starting to win that conversation.
He's becoming a household name at a moment when there's other big things happening in the world. You've got what's going on at the Pentagon and also what's going on at the CDC. Alex, there was a vaccine panel vote today. What was it about and what did they do?
Yeah, that's right. Look, there's the vote itself and then there's the process around it. The vote was on two things. One was pretty expected, actually, even in an alternate reality where there was a different vaccine panel that wasn't handpicked by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They backed a new RSV shot. That's pretty routine. They backed the flu vaccines for this coming fall. That's also pretty routine. But there was one difference, which is they opposed the use of this vaccine preservative called thimerosal, which people might remember is closely linked not just to a bunch of debunked theories about vaccines causing autism, but also the group that Health Secretary Kennedy used to head, Children's Health Defense. This meeting took place. That decision they made isn't going to make a huge difference for most people. Yeah, exactly. The flu vaccines, mostly in the United States, don't already use thimerosal. But the process by which they reached this decision, skipping all the career CDC officials, relying on one person who's the former head of Kennedy's group, Children's Health Defense, to reach that decision, that has a lot of people concerned that this is in some ways a test run for what's to come in all the future meetings when they turn their decisions to other vaccines, not just flu, not just COVID, not just RSV.
It's still so striking. The confirmation hearings brought some of these issues up. And the people who confirmed Secretary Kennedy seem satisfied by the answers, and then you see some turnabout here. So the Senate has that other issue it's dealing with right now, this problem.
Which one's that again?
The parliamentarian throws this wrench in the system. Based on the people you're talking to, how likely is it they iron this out by July 4th?
I mean, they are trying really hard. Leaders are really trying to figure out a way to get this over the finish line, because Donald Trump really wants it.
Or to brute force?
I think there's two pieces to this, right? One is they are trying to figure out how to rewrite this in a way that passes muster and also keep all their folks in line. And you see Trump using a lot of brute force. He was at the White House today. He had an event, the big, beautiful bill, as they call it, event. And he is making very clear he wants no one to leave Washington. He wants them to figure this out. He wants the bill in his desk by July 4th, and they are not budging on that. And so I think, and we've seen him, previously be very personal, call lawmakers, reach out to people. He's going to bring people in, no doubt. So he is doing a lot of things himself as well to try and make this happen.
Evan, quickly, how much do you think Democrats are ready to mobilize against this politically?
Oh, they're very ready. I mean, the Medicaid cuts contained in this bill, Democrats think this is sort of a godsend to them as they have been sort of in the wilderness. They found something to run against. And this is a quite interesting moment, right? Because this is the true test of how powerful Trump is and how powerful this Republican Party is. Because, like, what's going to happen in the end here, there's going to be a bill that a lot of Republicans don't like. That is just the way this is going to go because they have narrow margins and they have to put this bill together. Now, in the House, Trump was able to make that happen. Just like, too bad. Bite the bullet, you're doing this. Can he do it again? We don't know, but we do know that is going to be how it ends. It's going to have to be someone saying to these Republicans, you have to do this, and we'll see if they'll do it or not.
I'm going to rock your world, everybody. Less than 500 days till the midterm elections. Man, time is all kinds of freaky right now. Catherine, Evan, Alex, thank you all very much. Good job.
Thanks.
Virginia's historic showdown is also coming up. They got an election in November. And the state will almost certainly elect its first female governor. Abigail Spanberger is the Democratic nominee, and I will speak with her next on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Voters in Virginia are poised to elect the Commonwealth's first female governor this November. The Republican nominee is the state's lieutenant governor, Winsome Earl Sears. The Democratic nominee, three-term former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, with whom I spoke earlier. Some of this cycle in Virginia has been a little bit different, if not a little bit weird. Republicans are quite comfortable with their candidate. There's no primary. Winsome Sears, the lieutenant governor, is the nominee. The Democrats, there was no primary. Democrats either didn't think it was worthwhile or wise to challenge you. So they view you as the best representative of the party. So where should the party be going across the country? Because we see a whole range of Democrats that are competing in 2026.
So I think I'll pull it back to Virginia because I don't want to speak for anybody in any other state. But what I know to be true in Virginia and why I am so excited about so many of the candidates that we have running, certainly at the statewide level, but also we have 100 Democrats running in 100 House of Delegates seats. And there are people of their communities. There are people who want to go to Richmond and speak about the issues they're hearing from their communities. And as it relates to what drives me, I am campaigning on the issues that people have been bringing to me since I first got in this race. And my focus is solely and squarely on Virginia. And so I hope that if there's ever a kind of takeaway in the future, that it's, a candidate who was relentlessly focused on the strength of her Commonwealth, on being responsive to the needs of voters in every corner of her state, is the candidate who won.
Notwithstanding that, you must have some thoughts on the winner of the New York mayoral primary, Mr. Mamdani. I mean, he becomes a standard bearer of your party in a major jurisdiction, and you aren't exactly politically the same.
So I would say this. I do not, to any degree, assess that I know much about New York City politics. And so I'll defer to my former colleagues or for those who spend time as voters or spend their time in New York City to speak to that race. Because I know Virginia and our Commonwealth and the cities across Virginia, the counties across Virginia, the towns across Virginia. Everywhere I travel, people are talking about what it is that they want to see here at home. And it's a focus on affordability. It's a focus on lowering the cost of prescription drugs. It's recognition that in some parts of our state, we've seen extraordinary increases in energy bills. We've seen rental communities purchased up by out-of-state companies and prices have gone up. We've seen real challenges that impact people's ability to live in the communities that they want to live in and thrive in those communities. We know that Virginia's recovery after the pandemic in our math scores were 51st after every single state and the District of Columbia. And so Virginians want a governor who's focused on strengthening our education system and making sure that our kids, and I have 3 kids in Virginia public schools, our kids continue to learn in quality classrooms where the teachers are there for the long haul, where their governor respects their service to the community, where they are well paid, and where our kids are set up for success, whatever path they might choose, off into a career or off to college. That's what I'm hearing here in Virginia.
And your voters, your constituents, are so uniquely tied to the military in the Commonwealth, not just the Pentagon, all the naval stations, all the Army bases. Everything that happens in Virginia has so many connective tissues to the military. Are you surprised the public seems pretty split on their support of those airstrikes in Iran?
Well, I think importantly, in addition to our military footprint, which is extraordinary of all branches of service, we also have an extraordinary footprint of the intelligence community and the diplomatic community. And so I think that for those who have spent time in the national security space, certainly as I have as well as a former CIA case officer, there's a recognition and a clear-eyed view of the fact that, you know, Iran is a state sponsor of terror, that Iran is a destabilizing force within the Middle East, and that there is much more information necessary, certainly to be put before Congress, and ultimately, you know, down the line before the American public. I think for so many of us, certainly as someone who has represented military installations and the people who serve there, as well as someone running to be the governor of Virginia, my concern is about what comes next, the impact on so many of the families that I have represented and the families I want to continue serving, because I think it is extraordinarily vital that the president and his leadership team have an understanding, a clear-eyed understanding of what might come next, and that we as a nation are prepared for that. And those are that's the core of my worry and concern at this moment, is what are we preparing for? How closely are we coordinating with our closest partners and allies? And you know, certainly that into the future, the men and women of the armed services, as well as the diplomatic and intelligence communities, are protected. And certainly we saw a potential risk with the retaliatory intended strike on Qatar, and the potential risks that incidents like that could pose to our military personnel overseas in the future is, you know, what I continue to be worried about and want to ensure that there's congressional oversight of, and certainly that this administration has a plan moving forward.
Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
U.S. State Department layoffs could begin as early as Friday. Next, I'll speak with a Washington, D.C. area lawmaker helping to help them and help other former federal workers. You're watching The Takeout. Internal correspondents shared with CBS News shows the U.S. State Department may soon begin laying off hundreds of its employees, which would potentially join the tens of thousands of other federal workers who have lost their jobs since January. My next guest has an idea how to help these folks. I'm joined now by Will Jawando, Vice President for the Montgomery County Council in Maryland, also running for Montgomery County Executive. Montgomery County has a bigger budget and more people than many states, but has a lot of federal workers. You know, we're seeing this Seattle, Atlanta, New York, L.A., federal workers laid off starts to impact neighborhoods, economy. What's it doing in the county?
Yeah, it's a big impact for us. 70,000 plus federal workers, many more thousands, contractors, other businesses that rely on the federal government. We're home to NIH, NIST, FDA. Forget that these organizations are protecting the public, but this hits our bottom line. So far, at least 3,000 folks been let go. You think about what that's going to do to those families, obviously to the folks that they were working to protect, but also our bottom line, our budget. Our budget is just under $8 billion, bigger than 9 states to be exact. And half of that goes to our school system, our police, our fire. So we really are looking ahead to a tough time, not only to the impact of those families, but to our bottom line.
One of the reasons we brought you in is you have this interesting piece of legislation, I think goes for a vote in a couple weeks, that may be a model for other communities. It gives a plus and advantage for a laid off federal worker trying to get work in the county.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, so we have a 10,000 plus person workforce, Health and Human Services, police, fire, a whole bunch of services. This would give them a plus up. They would get a guaranteed interview if they were riffed or fired since January 1.
Guaranteed interview.
Guaranteed interview. Someone would call, make sure they meet the minimum qualifications of the job, and then they would be put ahead of others below our disabled veterans and below folks who have a disability in general. But they would be that next category. And I think that's what it sends a strong message saying, look, we value your expertise. We think you have something to offer. You give up your life to public service. We want to take advantage of that, but also help our county residents. And it's going to help our bottom line if we can hire some of them. We won't hire all, but we can hire some.
You've been a national voice in the party. You work with President Obama. You've served national Democrats. So you have unique insight on what's going on in New York City to a degree. You have this multi-Democrat primary in which the most progressive or one of the most progressive prevails. You know something about winning Democratic primaries.
One of few.
What lesson should people take, should the party take from what happened in New York City?
I think the party should take the lesson that you have to speak to what people are actually going through. You know, one of the things I'm most proud of that we passed in Montgomery County was rent stabilization. It was something that Mr. Mondani has been talking about, freezing rents. We stabilized them, capped them at 6%. But 40% of my residents, 400,000, they rent. And if they can't afford and if they know that their rent could go up any amount at any time, that's affecting their bottom line. Cost of childcare is other main issue. If you're a parent, I know you are, $2,000 a month in this area per kid if you want high quality childcare. That's insane. We have to provide that as a service, not only to those families, but to make sure kids are prepared when they go to school. So I think he was talking about kitchen cabinet, kitchen table issues that impacted people in a real way. And he did it with a positive vision. You know, had this happy warrior type, you know, kind of a persona. And I think that's what folks need to talk about. You know, progressive, sure. But he was talking about things that impact people's daily lives and in a way, and with real solutions, capturing that populism, that anger, kind of that Trump does with fear. He was doing it with hope and a positive message.
What should we make, though, of Republicans salivating over this? They want to bring this into Minnesota, to Michigan, Pennsylvania, win those swing races.
Well, I think the other thing he did is he galvanized young voters, which is something we need to look at. I think the real smart Republicans are concerned because they see it as the flip side of what Trump did. It's the positive side. You know, I think hope is always better than fear. Love is always better than hate. And I think people will take hate if you don't give them love, or they will take fear if you don't give them hope. I think what Mondani did is he said, yeah, I understand you're angry, and I understand why. He identified those issues correctly, and then said, here are some real solutions that I'm going to push for to help make your life better. And I think the smart Republicans should be worried about that. And he can wear a suit. He's very articulate. He knows how to deal with folks. He's not screaming from the rafters unless he has to. So I think I'm glad that some think that it's good for them, but I don't think it will be. I think it's tapping into something that is latent. When you look at this administration, they're talking about cutting 11 million people off Medicaid. No one wants to do that. They want support. They don't want things to be taken away.
Thanks for covering a lot of bases with us. Will Jawando, Montgomery County Council member, Vice President, County Council, candidate for Montgomery County Executive. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
That's it for today. That is The Takeout. But tune in tomorrow for my conversation with Delaware Democratic Congresswoman Sarah McBride. And stick around. The Daily Report is coming up next on CBS News 24/7.